Welcome in to the Locked On Packers Squad Show. As always, I am your host. My name is Brandon Sneide. Last week on this show, I said it loud and clear. Matt LaFleur and the Packers, they had no margin for error with this defensive coordinator hire. And Jonathan Gannon, ladies and gentlemen, proves they nailed that hire.
Hey, this is Coach Jags. Do the Packers stack up to these two Super Bowl teams?
And I'm Jacob Westendorf, and the most important hire of Matt LaFleur's career, Jonathan Gannon.
Go Pack Go! It's the Packers Squad. Everything Green Bay Packers every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from Titletown. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. From the frozen tundra with all the cheeseheads, the Packers Squad Show starts now.
You are Locked On Packers, parts of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you get audio podcasts, Apple, Google, Spotify. Wherever you find them, you will certainly find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for the fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. As always, thanks to each and every one of you who has made Locked On Packers their first listen each and every single day. As always, a jam-packed show today. We're going to grade those 2025 Packer rookies. Last week, we graded the team. We're going to take a look at the rookies, take a look at the coaching staff, look at the offseason priorities for our Green Bay Packers. What are some must-dos on the list for Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst? Coach nailed it at the beginning of the show. Where do you stack these Packers up against the Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots? Both of those teams punching their tickets to the Super Bowl. So we'll examine that. But gentlemen, last week we talked about candidates. We went down a list. We named, I think 10 or more at least, who the Packers should or would hire as their next defensive coordinator. Jeff Hafley, of course, going to Miami, taking over the head coaching duties. And we got our answer on Sunday morning. Matt LaFleur tabbing Jonathan Gannon. Jacob, I want to start with you. Your first initial reaction when you saw the news that Jonathan Gannon, the former Philadelphia Eagles defensive coordinator, I know you're familiar with his days over there in Philly, the failed, I don't want to say failed, but I guess that's what we're going to classify it as. He did fail as the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals over the last few years. But your initial reaction to Matt LaFleur and the Green Bay Packers hiring Jonathan Gannon to take over the defense in 2026?
Yeah, so my first thought is that I hope that the defensive line is similar to the one that he had in Philadelphia his last year when he was there. They sacked the quarterback 70 times. I'm not making that number up. But I guess a little surprised. I'm not surprised that they landed on him. I am a little surprised that with as much smoke as there was around Jim Leonard, the talk about the mutual interest from the first time around, the mutual interest this time around, that they didn't interview him. And there's been some reporting since then that the Packers thought that they might lose him or something like that. Mm-hmm. Gannon and LaFleur obviously have the same agent. So it's not something that like his agent would have said, hey, you know, this is going to happen if you don't hire him, and then find out he was lying. That doesn't work out that well for the agent, who's got to kind of, you know, play Switzerland on that because he represents both guys. Right. So I'm not surprised they landed on him, though. I think the status of him as a former head coach is something that LaFleur would value. He's never said that, I guess, outright, but just kind of what I've observed about him from over the years. I know that's something he's talked about kind of in passing about Rich Bisaccia and why he values him as a special teams coordinator and an associate head coach that way. Just a little surprised that was the route they went as quickly as they did, especially considering, you know, you wait one day and you could have talked to Leonard, who ended up losing. Now, he didn't know that when he hired Gannon. They hired him Sunday morning before the AFC Championship game had happened. But I think I think a lot of people, and we'll probably get into some of this stuff, but I think a lot of people are basing what they think they know about Jonathan Gannon based on 2 or 3 clips from social media. I will just advise you, I tweeted it yesterday. There's a clip from right before they played the 49ers in 2022 in the NFC Championship game where he stuck his head out the window to a couple of fans and says, we're going to bleeping gut these guys. Yep. So he's got a little bit of that nasty to him as well. I think that's something that maybe gets missed in some of that stuff. But overall, like I said, not surprised that they landed there, just a little surprised about the timing.
Coach, it was reported on Thursday. It was a 2-day interview that Matt LaFleur was conducting with Jonathan Gannon. At the time, we had brought it up on the show Thursday of last week, but we really didn't think anything of it. What's the benefit, do you think, you having been in these locker rooms and these team meetings and been around these teams, the benefit to hiring a former head coach to run one specific side of the ball?
Yeah, just a couple things. I think he was really successful in Philadelphia, and he's been in that media market where it's just brutal, as you know, Jacob, right? As far as hiring a head coach to be your coordinator, I think it's a great move, and here's why. Because he's been in that seat, and a lot of things happen behind the scenes that head coaches deal with that nobody else knows about, and they'll come into that staff meeting and he might be like just salty. The head coach might be salty, and Bisaccia and the new D coordinator will come in and go like, I know what he's thinking about. He's got other stuff that he's dealing with, so we got to make sure. And as far as the second interview or the second one, I've been involved in that at UCLA. I was out there for the O-line job, and they asked me to stay another day, and I thought I was going to get the job. I didn't, but another day just lets you be more familiar with the staff and how things are going to get done and how to fit in. I would imagine that they had defensive coaches in that meeting for that interview, rather than just LaFleur. So, but I think it's a great hire. I think always when you can hire a former head coach, I think that's really a good deal for your organization. The only thing, and here's the thing that you can't go like, well, we talked about this during the week, Brandon. If you're a successful coordinator, doesn't make you a successful head coach. Some guys are better coordinators than they are head coaches, and some guys are better head coaches than they are coordinators. And they just, the head coach, you got to see the big picture, everything. Like on defense, you're focused in on just the defense or the offense. Like if you're the coordinator, you're the head coach of the offense. You're the head coach of the defense, the D coordinator. You're the head coach of special teams if you're the special teams coordinator. So I think it's a good hire. I thought they were going to wait for Jim and give Leonard a shot to come back home. And the thing is, don't let that agent deal fall short on you guys, because those agents are doing back deal deals all the time. So, and what happened with Love and Parsons, right? Same agent. So they were talking all that time too.
Yeah, I talked about it last week. Like, this is the defense. You're in your window, right? I think you were in your window prior to going out and acquiring Micah Parsons on August 28th of this last year of 2025, I should say. But now you're definitely in your window with Micah Parsons. And you didn't have time, I feel like, to go out and acquire a defensive coordinator. It's not a shot at Christian Parker or Durante Jones or maybe Jim Leonard, but those guys haven't called. Al Harris was also interviewed by the Green Bay Packers. Like, those guys haven't called a defense. And Coach, you talked about it last week and how important and how different it is to go from not calling defenses to going to a team where your expectations are to play in February, and anything less of that would be considered a failure. The Green Bay Packers had to get this hire right. Look, I don't know if Jonathan Gannon is going to turn out to be the right hire as the defensive coordinator for the Green Bay Packers. What we do know is what he did in Philly, Jacob. And those numbers, every single category, the only one that's not in the top 10 in the 2 years he was in Philly is the pass yards throughout the course of a season. He's 11th that he allowed throughout the NFL. Everything else is in the top 10. And you kind of gone after a little bit of the player personnel that Philly had. I don't know, man. I think I put Green Bay kind of sort of on that same. They had 3 Pro Bowlers on that Philadelphia Eagles team. And I know the Pro Bowl this week, Shedeur Sanders and Keyshawn Nixon.
Baby.
Getting Pro Bowl. I get that, but I look at this Packers. I look at this Packers defense at all 3 phases, all 3 levels, I should say, right? The defensive line. I understand that they're not as deep as those Philly teams were. You got Micah Parsons, you got Devontae Wyatt, and I still believe in Lucas Van Ness to take that next step. I think that's a good starting point. Edgerrin Cooper, we saw TJ Edwards in the defense led by Jonathan Gannon in Philly, kind of ascent to who he is now and what got him paid during his time in the NFL and helped them get to a Super Bowl. I think Edgerrin Cooper can do everything that TJ Edwards can do and maybe a little bit better. I do. I firmly believe in Edgerrin Cooper. I look at the safety position. I look at, we already have an all-pro guy, Edgerrin Cooper, right? Micah Parsons also an all-pro. Xavier McKinney is an all-pro as well. Evan Williams, like Edgerrin Cooper, has the capabilities. There are some pieces to this Packers defense where Jonathan Gannon can come in here, use his experiences from Philly, And look, I know he didn't call defenses in Arizona. I know Arizona was a bleep show while he was the head coach there, and it wasn't great. That was still a pretty good defense for what they had and how they came up with the creativity they had for that defense in Arizona, given that personnel. I think he did a marvelous job there in Arizona. It obviously didn't work out for him. He found himself on the unemployment line, but nonetheless, like, he still took what he could in Arizona and made that a defense. Matt LaFleur, after week 7, talked about it. Man, that was a tough defense. Like, that was a defense, even on that 4th and 2, Jordan Love to Tucker Kraft, like, they had the Packers fooled. Like, they just balled out. Jordan Love and Tucker Kraft made a play. So it was a hire for me where you had to go out and get a guy who's kind of been a failed head coach, right? Been in front of the room, has addressed the team, has success as a defensive coordinator. We can point to the Eagles having the personnel they had on that defense, but you still got to take that defense and create a top 10 unit. They were number 3 in the NFL DVOA that year that they went to the Super Bowl. And yeah, you can point to the second half of that Eagles Chiefs Super Bowl and how that defense sort of fell apart. That's also Patrick Mahomes, guys, on the other side of the ball. Like, that's still a really good quarterback, maybe the best of all time at the quarterback position. He has been able to take a defense and take them to the level that we're aspiring to go to. To me, flat out, I just think that was the right hire. Like, you had to go out and get the guy that was proven, and you don't have to like Matt LaFleur. You don't have to like Brian Gutekunst. You don't have to like the process of the Green Bay Packers. You can want Jim Leonhard because he's from Wisconsin. We still don't know the type of defensive coordinator Jim Leonhard is or will be. He's never called the defense at this level. I don't know what he can or cannot do. I know for certain, what I know is what I know, that Jonathan Gannon took that defense in Philly and took them to a Super Bowl. That is what I do know. Nick Sirianni, whatever you think about Nick Sirianni, there's a lot of things you probably think about him. He raved up and down about Jonathan Gannon. Ross Tucker, who was on our show today on the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network, who covered him for his time down there in Philly for Westwood One and CBS, raved about Jonathan Gannon. Former coaches and players are raving about Jonathan Gannon. Yeah, there's a couple of Eagles players from their time that are saying bad things. You're going to have that. You guys are on the live chat right now talking about us, talking bad about us. Like, not everybody's going to have a great approval rate for who you are. But I know what Jonathan Gannon was able to do in Philly, and that was take that defense to the next level, a top 5 unit in almost every single category that year, and take them to a Super Bowl. Jacob, putting you on the spot here a little bit, personnel fit. And I know Gannon doesn't necessarily run a quote unquote scheme according to him, but when you look at, take Micah Parsons out of the category, because I think we'll all agree that it's going to be Micah.
Take the best player out. Okay,
just for this specific question.
Yeah.
From a personnel fit, who benefits do you think the most? Because you obviously seen a little bit of him in Philly. Who benefits the most under Jonathan Gannon in Green Bay?
Yeah, so I'll say this. One of the best things, Coach, you'll say this, the best coaches, what do? They adapt their scheme to the personnel they have. So that quote about Jonathan Gannon saying, I don't have a scheme, I saw people using that as like, oh my God, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. It's like, no. He's taking who his best players are. And that's really what like Jeff Hafley did. I remember when he was asked about, it was in 2020, his first season, so 24, when they played Minnesota, and they were like, can you have Jair Alexander shadow Justin Jefferson? And he was like, it's kind of our job as coaches to make sure our best players get matched up with their best players, which is in the past, Joe Barry and even Mike Pettin to some degree were just kind of like, they kind of scoffed at the question. We're like, yeah, we can't do that. Like, we have to, the structure of the defense is this. To answer your question outright, I think that Gannon will walk into the room and say, who are the players I need to emphasize and make sure are in position that I need to get the most out of these guys? Like when Hafley came here, I remember one of the first questions he was asked about was Quay Walker, and they hired Campanelli and he brought in Sean Duggan. And like the idea was we're going to get these linebackers up to snuff quickly. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson led the league in interceptions when Gannon was in Philadelphia in 2022. And Gardner-Johnson is a lot of things. A ball hawking safety, not really one of those things. He had a good year in Chicago this year after he got there as well. But so I think that's something that bodes well for Xavier McKinney or Evan Williams. Maybe it's Javon Bullard, but one of those guys like that to set some of those things up for those guys to make some plays. And then the other ones I looked at specifically, you mentioned the guys who on their defensive line had a lot, and they had a lot of guys like, Brandon Graham and Hassan Reddick. Those guys were really good. Javon Hargrave. But those are the guys I was going to mention it next was Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox were big time players for them. So I think that bodes well for Devontae Wyatt. And I think it bodes well for Green Bay chasing a free agent defensive. Now they're not going to be at the top of the market. So whoever this year's version of Milton Williams is, they're not going to find him, but they're going to be in the market, I think, for a defensive tackle to put next to Wyatt, whether that's maybe Kenny Clark if he gets released from Dallas or something to that effect, just to toss a name out there. But I think those defensive tackles are going to have chances to kind of attack, which bodes well for Devontae Wyatt specifically, who, if he's ever healthy, the flashes of Devontae Wyatt are very, very, very high end.
Yep.
Like Micah Parsons has spoken glowingly about him any chance he's gotten. So I think that's kind of the two spots there, defensive tackle, and then those safety spots if they could find somebody. So, hopefully next year, I mean, Green Bay almost can't take the ball away less this year than they did this past season. So hopefully that's the case. And I think that, like I said, Evan Williams, Xavier McKinney, somebody back in that group is going to have a chance to make a lot of plays on the football.
Coach, how much stock do you put into Gannon was in Philly for 2 years, and I rattled off, some of the stats, that he, that the Eagles had under him. And certainly 2022 was their best year. This year they go to the Super Bowl 14-3 overall, and we're just lights out defensively. That next year was a major drop off for the Philadelphia Eagles defense. And now some of those players changed, not a ton. A majority of those players were still on that Eagles defense, and they eventually go out and get Vic Fangio to run that defense there in Philly, and kind of are looking for an answer after Jonathan Gannon left to become the head coach at Arizona. Do you put any stock into the type that, like, that's the type of coach he is, that you can have that talent 1 year and then he leaves and it sort of has not just a little drop off, a major drop off? You're talking, 30th in points, like bottom third, I should say, in most statistical categories after Jonathan Gannon left Philly.
Yeah. You know what? Let's just talk about the Detroit Lions when that, when that coordinator left, and I didn't think it was
Ben Johnson.
I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal, but that's the drop off that they had, and they ended up having, Campbell was calling it. Now they're bringing a new guy in there, so they have to restart. But what they'll do when Gannon gets into Green Bay, he'll get with the defensive staff. All the scouts will be in there. The GM will be in there. And they will watch film after film after film, and he'll be able to evaluate. He'll evaluate the guys, what he thinks about them, but he also wants the opinion of those assistant coaches in there. So it's a process. I remember coming into Green Bay as Mike's coordinator. We did the same thing, watched every game, but there was a whole new staff though that we all came in with Mike. But still, they're going to have to get familiar with their personnel. He'll do a good job. The good coaches always put players in their position to succeed.
When these interviews happen, Coach, just kind of take me behind the scenes here for real quick. Yeah, when you got a guy like Micah Parsons on defense, you have a guy like Xavier McKinney, as we mentioned, both of those players, are the Packers All-Pro at their position. Do you resort to their opinion if you're in that hiring committee? Do you go to Micah like, hey, we're looking at maybe interviewing Jim, but we haven't picked up the phone yet. He's obviously playing in a game, this weekend. We've interviewed with Jonathan Gannon. We've interviewed with Al Harris. Do you go to players for their experiences, for their thoughts, their insights into who may or may not be hired?
I think maybe at the quarterback spot, at the quarterback spot, absolutely. They asked Brett, and they just did the same thing with the Steelers down there with McCarthy. They, I'm sure they think maybe Aaron's coming back, maybe he's not coming back. I think one of the reasons Mike got hired down there. But I never put much stock. I mean, you'd listen to him, but coaches are a little bit different than what players are. I mean, they know what they're looking for a little bit differently than what players are. But they probably asked, but what does Parsons know about Gannon?
I mean, he played. The only thing I would know is that he was in Philly. Obviously, they didn't play against each other,
right?
Quote unquote, because they're both on defense. But he saw Philly twice a year,
Sure.
So there's some familiarity, with going up against, that offense going up against the Philly defense twice a year. I don't know, and that's why I was asking, because I'm curious where where it comes into coaching. We're seeing reports that Josh Allen may or may not have been the reason Joe Brady was hired in Buffalo, because he was sitting in on those interview panels. So I was just curious.
Like I'm saying, quarterback,
it's different. Yeah.
I think
that's fair, but I think Micah probably holds that weight of what a quarterback, and maybe Xavier McKinney's not on that level, but I think Micah would be. Jacob, outside of the Packers going to the Super Bowl this upcoming season, this next season. That's obviously what success would look like for the Green Bay Packers overall. What would success to you look like defensively with Jonathan Gannon? Now, I know we may be a little bit too far in front of our skis here. We don't know what the Packers are going to do when it comes to free agency. We don't know if Quay Walker's going to be a part of this team. We don't know who they're going to be able to go out and acquire. We don't know what the draft class looks like. So there's a lot of that unknown. I understand that. But if you were to chalk up success and what it looks like defensively for the Green Bay Packers in 2026, how would you describe that?
I think that's what they've been chasing for the last couple of years. Has kind of been that top 10 unit. Are they able to? Can you win a game on defense if the offense is starting to scuffle a little bit? Can you find that complementary football is kind of the buzzword in Green Bay all the time, because their defense and their special teams, their offense falls apart. They rarely get all three phases playing well in the same game. But I think that, when you hire a guy like Gannon and you're trying to get into the Super Bowl, it just doesn't happen where you have, very often at least, where you have the best offense and the 27th ranked defense or something like that. You have to be good enough on both sides of the ball. I know we're in a new age now. Defense does not win championships anymore. I think that saying is a little outdated.
Is that changing though?
I think it is.
Yeah. That's a great question. I want to
So the point that I would say for that is that when they say defense wins championships, it's you don't need an offense to go with that. I really don't think you're the New York Jets when they had Mark Sanchez or something like that. They couldn't score enough to do anything like that. But you also cannot have the 2011 Packers, who had the best offense maybe ever and the worst defense in the NFL that season. They lost their very first playoff game for something like that. But I do think typically, not always, since they haven't won a Super Bowl since 2011, when you look at it at the end of the year, it's what was the weaker unit, especially in the playoffs? It was probably on the defensive side of the ball. And when the Packers won the Super Bowl in 2010, they had two games where Philly only scored 16 points and Chicago only scored 14. The other two games, the offense kind of went bonkers and scored 31 in the Super Bowl, and I think it was 48 against Atlanta. So they were balanced, right? They could win any style of fight. This Packers team by the end of the season, what were we saying on these shows before the playoffs? What's their best bet of getting to the Super Bowl? Well, Jordan Love and the offense has to go bananas. That formula does not work. Unless
not consistently.
No, unless it's Tom Brady and you're asking him to score 40 points a game, maybe he could figure out a way to do that. But the idea of, we have to score 40 if we're going to win today, that's not going to work. So Gannon's success, again, without knowing what I know and everything, is it a top 10 defense that, to use a LaFleur phrase, it's playing its best football when it gets into December, January?
Yeah, and have a little bit of injury luck on that side of the ball, please. Yeah. You need Micah. Coach, you wanted to make
number one on the field would help.
Keep number one on the field will definitely help. Is it changing, Coach? Is it we're used to the offense pouring up points and whatnot. We saw a 10-7 AFC Championship game.
Yep.
Obviously, the backup quarterback in the snow may have attributed to that a little bit, but it does feel like, Coach, it's starting to go away from your side of the ball and go to the defensive side of the ball.
Well, the classic one was Baltimore back in the day with Reed and all those guys, right? They were just as good. They didn't have to score a lot of points in Baltimore that year.
10 was enough. 10.
It was, right? Could you imagine that? Guys, we just got to win 10, 14 points. We're going to be fine. Could you imagine? That's what a great situation. But I still think you have to have a really, really strong defense, because a lot of times, where does the personality of your team come from?
Nastiness,
mostly from the defensive side of the ball, right? Now, your offensive line obviously has got to be physical and all that. I get that. The thing that really stuck out to me this weekend was Seattle's defense. They were just stifling. I was like, God, these guys, because I haven't really followed them, right? I said, man, these guys are good. And they still ended up scoring some points on them, but I thought Seattle. But I think you have to have a balance too, Jacob. I thought you made a really good point on that. And the thing is, offensively, I always said, we got to score one more point than they give up. And if I was a defensive guy, we got to hold them to 1 point less. So that was always the formula.
The Green Bay Packers taking Jonathan Gannon to run their defense heading into 2026. The rookies this year for the Green Bay Packers, some good, some bad, some in between. We're going to hand out our grades for the 2025 Green Bay Packer rookies, as well as the coaching staff. That's coming up on Locked On Packers right after this.
Hey, it's Matt Derry from the Locked On Lions podcast. The people I love depend on me. If I'm gone, the financial responsibilities don't disappear. I didn't want my family figuring things out during the hardest moment of their lives. That's why I knew only one place to go. I chose life insurance through my friends at Ethos. Ethos makes getting life insurance fast and easy, 100% online. You can get a quote in seconds, apply in minutes, and get same-day coverage. There's no medical exam. You just answer a few simple health questions. You can get up to $3 million in coverage. Some policies are as low as $30 a month. I love the folks at Ethos. Protect your family with life insurance from Ethos now by going to ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. In as little as 10 minutes, you can get the free quote and up to $3 million in coverage at ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. That is ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Ethos.com/LockedOnNFL. Application times and rates may vary.
Green Bay Packers 2025 season is in the books. A few more bows to put on this past season before we move on. Last week, we went through position by position. We had Grant Bills and Peter Bukowski on the show, and we went over our initial grades for the Green Bay Packers position by position. And I'm going to categorize it a little bit differently for this show. We didn't go over the rookies last week, and we didn't go over the coaching staff last week. So I want to begin with the Green Bay Packers rookies. Okay. That includes Matthew Golden, Anthony Belton, Barron Sorrell, Savion Williams, to name a few. Coach, Matthew Golden, you heard me all year kind of pound the table that I wanted to see MG have his opportunities, and we saw them here and there, right? We saw it in Dallas a little bit, had it in Cleveland for that one big catch, and then we saw it in the playoffs, in the wild card round against the Chicago Bears. We saw Anthony Belton, coach, who played the most snaps out of all of these Packers rookies with 588. We saw him make his start at right tackle in week 2 against the Washington Commanders in that game. I thought he held up pretty well. Then we saw him kind of just settle into right guard after the Elton Jenkins injury, after Sean Ryan was moved from right guard to center. We saw Barron Sorrell throughout parts of the season. It's most notably in that Minnesota game where the Packers sat seemingly all of their starters in the regular season finale. But if you had to kind of put an overall grade, coach, and I know it's hard to grade rookies because they're just kind of not playing a ton, but it felt like this year for the Packers, 6 of them got noticeable playing time for the Packers this season. That doesn't always happen in Green Bay. Obviously, this is a draft and develop organization, but it felt like, coach, this was a rookie class that contributed more than we were used to in years past. If you had to kind of put an overall grade on this rookie class, where would you fall grade-wise for the rookies of the 2025 Packers?
You know what the thing is just like the amount of snaps you got. And the thing that with Golden, I know you were pounding on the table for the guy, and I was too. I was cheering for the guy. He just, and I know he got hurt and everything, but he didn't appear very much. I mean, he didn't get a lot of targets either, though, right? I think he's a super, super talented guy, and maybe, 1 year, where it's like limited playing time. I mean, he didn't get a lot of playing time, I didn't think. Do you know how many snaps he took, Brandon, by any chance?
I could pull it up. I know Anthony Belton led the rookies with 558.
Yeah. Well, I would have liked to see him more. He just seemed like he disappeared a little bit, and I don't know if they really found a way to use him effectively. And I think he was just like a fill-in guy. That's kind of what he looked like to me this year. But, the rookies are what they are. Williams, the only time I really saw him was on jet sweeps. They put him on jet. They didn't. I don't know if they really knew what
he had. One big reception in New York that kind of set them up, to take over. Matthew Golden, by the way, had 452 snaps. So 43% of the offensive snaps for the Green Bay Packers. Because you remember too, like when Matt shined, I do think he shined. It was in that absence of Christian Watson still hadn't come back from the ACL injury, and they lost Jayden Reed in week 2. And we saw right away in week 3 in Cleveland and in week 4 in Dallas, we saw a little bit of Matthew Golden. And then for whatever reason, after that, I don't know why, when you don't have Christian Watson and you don't have Jayden Reed, it felt like a great opportunity for Matt LaFleur, for Jordan Love to integrate Matthew Golden into the rotation of the receivers that they had there with those 2 guys missing, but it just didn't happen.
Right. I mean, and you can you can design your passing games. Go like, I'm going to throw it to that guy, right? I mean, they did it with Watson, and they could have done it with Golden, but I mean, if you guys are just curious, what was he? What kind of route runner was he? Is he more of a straight line guy? He wasn't like an option runner. They didn't do anything like that with him. And if you got like 4.2 speed, you do want to throw the guy down the seam or up the sideline on a go ball. But you just didn't see a lot of it. But he'll be better next year. The Belton, I mean, do you remember when he had like 5 penalties on the beginning? Go like, man, oh man.
I want to say that might have been his game, and Jacob can correct me if I'm wrong. I felt like that was the right tackle game against the Commanders.
It was the Colts in the preseason where LaFleur basically undressed him on the field going into the half.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't get lined up.
Yeah, that's just a guy, trying to get his feet wet but he got better, and you're gonna get better and better the more reps that you get. And he had 500 some snaps.
558. Yeah, he obviously played the most for sure.
Yeah, and he played more in one position as well. So that's gonna bode well as the future moves forward.
Jacob, I know you wrote about this a couple weeks ago for Packers on SI and graded this rookie class. I'm not gonna lie to you, I didn't think this class. I'm not the draft guy. I'm not the guy that breaks down the film. I know the Senior Bowl is going on right now. I don't necessarily know how these guys did in college, but when the Packers had this draft, and obviously it was a big one, it was in Green Bay, and then you took the receiver in the first round. It felt like there was more hype at the front half of the draft, right? The Matthew Golden. We didn't really know, like the Anthony Belton pick, people were kind of up and down about because of what he did in college, but everybody was on Matthew Golden. Like that was the pick for the Green Bay Packers over the last decade. But when you peel the layers back a little bit, this was a sneaky deep draft by Brian Gutekunst and the front office.
Yeah, some of that remains to be seen. Barron Sorrell obviously was in and out of the lineup. He was a healthy scratch at points during the season, and his last game that he played snaps in was significantly, at least, was against Minnesota. Obviously had a big game there, and is in line to kind of take a big role for this team next year. I don't know what they're going to do with Rashawn Gary. I don't expect Kingsley Enagbare back. If both of those guys are gone, then he's kind of the first man off the bench with Lucas Van Ness and Micah Parsons starting, which means early in the season he might be starting, across from Van Ness if Parsons isn't able to go early in the season. Colin Oliver, kind of the same thing. He was dinged. He was injured when they drafted him. He got injured again during the season, and he played snaps against Minnesota, and that was it. It was kind of a redshirt season for him. And then their 7th round pick, John Williams, he practiced at the end of the year, and that was it. He got reverted back to injured reserve after not being activated off the PUP list. So some of those later guys, next year is kind of their true rookie season. Savion Williams, you guys mentioned, didn't do much as a receiver. I think from the Giants game forward, he was wearing a walking boot, and he had a foot injury for most of that stretch before being put on injured reserve. And that, I'm curious to see how much that affected him, because from a ball in his hands running standpoint, that's supposed to be one of his strong suits. I can't remember a play where it was like I kind of started rising out of my seat like so, thinking that, oh my God, he might be gone. There was one play against Washington where he took the snap at quarterback and faked a pitch to Jordan Love. And I remember Love after the game saying, I wish he hadn't fallen down because he might have scored on that play, but that was really it. Golden and Belton are the big two, because I think both of those guys are in line to be starters next season. Golden can replace Romeo Doubs and, maybe not the same exact position and output and all that kind of stuff, but just that idea. The one thing about Golden that you like to see at the end of the year is in the playoffs, it's 4th down for the season, and Love dials one up for Golden, and Golden makes the play. And my pal Jacob Morley always says, whatever it is, Golden has it. And there were some plays throughout the season that kind of proved that. That was one of them. There was a deep ball against Cincinnati that kind of sealed the game that way. A few rookie mistakes. You mentioned the game against Cleveland. He catches a deep ball and kind of drifts out of bounds. He could have scored on a given play like that. But there was another, like the next week against Dallas, 4th down and ball game. He's the one who's open on a 10-yard hitch route and makes the play for the first down. So I don't think there's much to worry about with Matthew Golden. I think that, I thought most of the discussion surrounding him was kind of silly throughout the year just because the offense was really good. Like if the offense had stunk, then I would have understand wanting him on the field more. But they, when they drafted him, it was like they've got 4 guys who have all succeeded in the NFL. lining up in front of him. Now, the one criticism that I think you could kind of point at Matt LaFleur, and a conversation point I hope they have in the offseason, is they don't need to rotate as many guys into the game throughout the course of the game. God bless Bo Melton, but any of those snaps that went to him, and I know there weren't many. I know Peter has pointed out the numbers not being that drastically different, but any of those snaps could have gone to Golden. You don't need to rotate some of these guys in and out as much as they do. At some point, going into 26 here, the best players in 11 personnel are Watson, Reed, Golden, and Kraft. And if you get all those guys operating at their peak, that's a really fast, really explosive, really dynamic offense that can put a lot of things together. And then if Belton can grow into, some of his high snaps or, his high-end snaps are really high-end. He's got some low-end stuff too that he's got to clean up. But I think having an offseason to focus on playing guard, how do I say this nicely? They wasted time by playing him at tackle during training camp and the regular season portion. There was a guy who I felt like was always suited to play guard, and eventually they did do that and moved Morgan to tackle. I felt like they had those two guys flip-flop throughout the course of the season. So I'm bullish on Anthony Belton. I thought I like the idea of getting a people mover like that. He just needs to play a little bit more to his size, a little bit more to his play strength, and get to, I think him and Tom on the right side could be legitimate, people mover type stuff if they're able to get him into that second year jump. But those two guys, I think those are the big ones moving forward.
It is worth noting too. Golden had his own share of injuries throughout the course of this season. He had the wrist and the shoulder and kind of, nagging injuries that just couldn't get him going. Final grade. I'll go first. I have a B+ with the rookies this year. Jacob, where are you at? I know it's kind of incomplete because we didn't see a ton of them, but what we saw is what we saw. I do think they have a guy in Baron Sorrell. I think Colin Oliver, I know it was only one game. I'm excited to see him healthy going into next year and seeing what he can do. I don't necessarily know enough about Savion Williams, but you give me 6 guys in this class alone that contributed to this team. That's a good draft class, man. That's a B+ for me.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a C- just because Oliver, you said you're excited to see him healthy. I've never seen that. That's not necessarily his fault.
Well, give him, what was it, a hamstring injury?
It was a hamstring, and then he had a pec injury as well. So he's been dinged his whole career. I just need to see him on the field. Baron Sorrell, in and out of the lineup, healthy scratch at times. So there were times where they thought other player, like he wasn't good enough to have a helmet on game day. I didn't mention Warren Brinson in that whole thing. He's going to have, I think, a potentially big role next season as a guy who's got to make a second-year leap as well. But, the only play of note that he really made was a face mask on Caleb Williams that wiped out what could have been.
And if he doesn't if that isn't a face mask, that's the play of the year for the Packers defense, maybe.
Arguably, yeah, they would have probably won the NFC North if that had happened. But, if ifs and buts and, the rest of the phrasing there. But, Golden and stuff, the production is just not there. But that doesn't make me not excited for this draft class moving forward. I'm still not 100% sure what they want to do with Savion Williams. They said they want him to play traditional receiver, but like you guys mentioned, he had one catch in a traditional receiver's role down the field. Otherwise, he looked kind of just like a gadget player and a kickoff returner, and I'm not sure how good he is at returning kickoffs. So, a little bit lower for this year, but it's not a disastrous draft class where they took, a 7th-round guy in the 1st round and he can't play.
Coach, your overall grade for the Green Bay Packers 2025 rookies?
One of the things I wanted to mention, anytime that you move up in a level, whether it's, high school to college to the pros, the biggest thing that players have to adapt to is the speed of the game. It's just so fast. That's why so few rookies are just really super excel. But I think, those guys are, I thought, like C+. They contributed, but you really never noticed them.
All right, so maybe my B+ is a little high, but I'll take that. I am a fan.
Eternal optimist, Brandon Sneide.
That's true. Yeah. We do have a few minutes, so we got to make this sort of briefish, and I know it's going to be very difficult. We didn't do the coaching staff when we did the grades last week, and I'd be remiss if we did not do the coaching staff for the job they did or the job they did not do in 2025. Coach, I'll start with you. You are the coach. You get to grade the coaches. Probably the first time, maybe not the first time you've done this. I'm sure you've done this in the many other stints that you've had. Yeah. Your overall grade for the Green Bay Packers coaching staff, you can break it down with Matt LaFleur and Bisaccia and Jeff Hafley.
I think
you're speechless.
No. I thought that, Hafley did a great job. He did. But, the thing is, we lost the last 5 ball games, guys. Yeah. we did. I don't, we got hurt, and hey, everybody gets hurt, so, but losing 5 in a row at the end, that's not a good thing. And I know that the injuries played a big part of it, but everybody has injuries. I think LaFleur is a good football coach. I really do. I think he's a good offensive mind. Sometimes he gets too cute. That one pass that he threw to an offensive lineman, that right there is like a complete.
So that not to defend LaFleur, but that wasn't necessarily supposed to happen.
What's that?
He was asked about that after the game, and that was more of a Jordan Love had to bail out last second, and Darian Kennard was an eligible receiver, and it worked out. Like it worked out.
It almost didn't. It was all a disaster.
Yes, I know, but I get it.
Yeah, but I think he's good. I think the special teams, I'll give that a C-. I just because every time we had that conversation, it's like, well, this isn't. And I know you guys were on Rich and all that, and I mean, I thought they were just okay. I didn't think it was like, man, these guys are super, super good on special teams. Did you see anything like really special this year? I thought the punter.
Yeah, he led the league in punting.
I thought that was good. I thought the kick coverage was fine. I know they let that Bears game, they let a big return in the punt return game, but I thought the kick coverage was pretty good. Like it's middle of the pack. Like it's not great, it's not bad. It's just it's not it kind of is what it is for the Packers standard, I suppose. In special teams, it's probably above average.
Yeah, well, Hafley did. He did a good job. He did, but when you lose your best player, but let's say this, guys. I'm gonna throw this one out there. Let's say Parsons didn't come to Green Bay. What do you think it would have looked like?
Whew. With the way it looked the last 5 games, I've thought about that a lot over the last couple of weeks.
I mean, just think about that, right? It's like take that guy out of the mix, and Kenny's still here. Right? I go, what would this defense have done? Because how many sacks did he end up getting?
Parsons had 12 and a half.
12 and a half. Who was going to make up that?
Not Rashawn Gary. That we do know. It wasn't Rashawn Gary.
He was a where's Waldo too? He disappeared.
Yeah, and I think part of it is, and I'm not defending anybody else. I know it's going to come off like it is, but I think LVN would have had a better year statistically. Easy for me to say. Had he been healthy, I do believe. I think he was off to a really good start. He got hurt sacking a quarterback. So I think they would have been better. I'm not saying it would have been the best, but I think those numbers would look maybe a little bit better had LVN and Devontae Wyatt, for that matter, kind of stayed healthy.
And here's just another question I just want to throw out to you guys. Parsons not here. Hafley, is he in Miami right now?
Yep.
You still think?
I do. Yeah. I said it, Coach. I said it before.
I know you liked him. Before.
I said it before we acquired him. That Jeff Hafley was. I mean, he got interviewed last year for a head coaching job. That guy can grab any room. Like he's a leader. Like that's what he is. It's what he's done. I know his numbers at BC aren't great. He's been all over the NFL before coaching position. So I did think he was on his way to becoming a head coach. And I think I do believe he would have been a head coach.
And I know here's one of the things too, is like, sometimes you get like hire guys and it's like winning the press conference. Winning the press conference has nothing to do with how good a coach he is. You know what I mean?
Oh, but I tell you what, did you see Hafley's presser? He won it.
I did.
Yeah.
He won it down in Miami.
He's impressive in front of a room. He is, but the thing is, again, I'm doing interviews like, guys, if you want to win the press conference, go get that guy. Right. And I want them to be. I want all these guys to be successful. They get their first opportunity to go be a head coach, and he does have some. He's got a track record at BC. BC's a hard job. He was, a little bit below 500. It's a tough job, but all these NFL jobs are tough too.
Jacob, your grades for the coaching staff 2025?
Well, first show that I did with you guys, I said I thought that the head coach deserved to get fired. So I'm not going to tell you
harsh, but okay, carry on.
I'm not going to tell you that they get an F, because that to me would have been, to get an F, they would have had to go like 4-12, right? To me, that is a complete failure of a season. But when you lose 5 games to finish the year, you blow a bunch of I think there was 3 fourth quarter leads blown in that time frame. And I think you grade on the curve of the fact that they blew a 21-3 lead against Chicago in the playoffs. Like, talk about the injuries, talk about all that stuff. I think we've said this on here before. Did losing Parsons and Kraft make it so they couldn't win a Super Bowl? Yes. Like Bart Winkler said, and it was him on here, Chicago spotting you 18 points also kind of makes up for that. Blowing that lead, that drags that grade down significantly. Bisaccia, he kind of gets blamed, I think, too much for some of the issues in Green Bay for what I think is kind of they haven't had a good special team since Jags was there. Like, it's been a minute, right?
Yep.
Alan Rossum and guys like that once upon a time. So I don't understand the thought process on that, but that's another story for a different day. I do think that overall Green Bay had a good coaching staff. Matt LaFleur, I do think, is a good coach. I do think Jeff Hafley is a good coach. I think once the avalanche started, Shane Falco always talked about quicksand in the movie The Replacements, where one thing goes wrong and then another and another and another, and you can't breathe and you can't think and everything, and all of a sudden you're just kind of overwhelmed, like you're standing in quicksand. I'm giving the group a D. Like, when you lose the last 5 games of the season and blow a huge lead in the playoffs, like, that game alone could make it so they get an F. But I'm not going to go that far on that front, because I do think the other reality is, for both sides of the coin, they were 9-3-1. That tie's going to screw me up all offseason, but they were 9-3-1 at one point during the year before they completely fell apart at the end of the year. But they have to be better next year. I think LaFleur has to figure out how to get his team to every year we talk about, like, what's the one game you're going to lose, or it's a couple games you're going to lose where you look back on them like, man, how the hell did they lose that game? Or how the hell did they tie this game in the case of, like, Dallas and Cleveland? You don't have to lose those games. With LaFleur, I remember at the end of the season, he was talking about how they had to get games at home and how geography and stuff was going to matter and things like that. Well, the way to do that is no game in the NFL is a layup, right? We'll say that much. But beating Cleveland, in theory, is easier than beating the Seattle Seahawks, right? Is that fair enough to say?
That's fair.
Winning those games on your schedule like that, you have to, and especially with, the division next year, guys, not getting any easier. I don't know what Minnesota is going to bring at the quarterback position, but they won 9 games with J.J. McCarthy, Carson Wentz, Max Brosmer, and Deacon Westendorf playing quarterback. Like, it was a lot, right? Chicago, in theory, is going to take a step next season. Detroit plays a 4th-place schedule, and they are very talented. I don't think they missed the playoffs this year because of a lack of talent. Sometimes it's just not your year. So Green Bay has to be up and running early next year, and they have to win. They've got a tough, group of scheduling that they have too, some tough road games and everything like that. But, overall this year, the job not good enough, and something that, frankly, could have. It didn't. It turns out that wasn't the thinking inside 1265, but it could have gotten the head coach fired. Whenever that happens, your grade's not going to be very high.
There you have it. The final grades for the 2025 Green Bay Packers. We talked a lot about what the Packers did this past season. What do they need to do on this upcoming off season? We take a look at those top priorities for 2026 coming up right after this. Tonight's Locked On Packers Squad Show is brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like being at an NBA arena. The crowd, the energy, the moment. Getting tickets, though, that part hasn't always been so simple. That's why Gametime has become the go-to app for scoring tickets fast without the hassle. It puts the advantage back where it belongs, with you, the fans. I absolutely love this app. I love being able to see the view from the seat before buying. It has made every decision super, super simple. Love seeing all the all-in-one upfront pricing, too. No surprise fees at checkout. Take all the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app today, create an account, use code LOCKEDON. You get $20 off your first purchase. Once again, that's code LOCKEDON, and you get $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. And remember, it's gametime.com. Tonight's Locked On Packers Squad Show also brought to you by our wonderful friends over at FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. That's right. One final Sunday, one last kickoff. The final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially and unfortunately comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. If you're a new customer, you can bet just $5 and you get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Let me repeat that for you. If you are a new customer and you sign up at FanDuel.com and you bet just $5, you will get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season is officially over. Let's call for football on FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com. 2025, gentlemen, is now in the rearview mirror for our Green Bay Packers. Lots of questions ahead of this team, but we do know at least that their head coach is here to stay. Their general manager is reportedly here to stay. They have the defensive coordinator sort of figured out. They're going to get other coaching, changes here and there. Reportedly, a couple people leaving. Some will probably come alongside with Jonathan Gannon. So we have a little bit of an answer to what the offseason could look like. But Jacob, I want to start with you. This is obviously the Super Bowl window. I think all of us will agree that the Packers are in that window to compete and win the Lombardi Trophy. If you had to overview this and look at this, 30,000 feet above, what should be the offseason priority for the Green Bay Packers heading into 2026?
The line of scrimmage is almost always the answer to that question, in my opinion, but especially so in Green Bay. Offensive line this year, I don't know how much retooling you're going to be able to do, but it was not good this year. I think by the end of the year, we kept saying, if this, then this, and if that, then this. Wasn't good enough. Maybe that means a coaching change happens. Maybe it doesn't. Regardless of who the coach is, the players have got to play better. There's plenty of investment that has been made in that group. Let's just say for grins, they bring back Sean Ryan. Then you have a first-round pick, a priority free agent, a guy you re-signed, a second-round pick, and a guy you gave a lot of money to in Zach Tom as your starting five. That group, in theory, should be good enough to be better than what it was a year ago. I think one of the biggest problems Green Bay had in that playoff game was that they could not run the football. And when you have to be one-dimensional throwing the football with the lead, that can lead to some issues because, one, an incomplete pass puts you instantly behind the sticks, and it stops the clock, which extends the game further. And on the defensive side of the ball, they just didn't have enough quality players on their defensive front. Now, some of that's going to need organic growth, right? Like Lucas Van Ness has to take a step. I think the single most important player becoming a borderline star to star-like player, can he be what Brandon Graham was for the 2022 Eagles, just for example, to Micah Parsons' version of Hassan Reddick? If he can do that, then Green Bay is going to be in really good shape as far as their pass rushing situation goes. And on the interior of the defensive line, I just think they need some impact players. Goody has drafted one defensive lineman in the top 100 since he took over as the Packers general manager, and that was Wyatt, who he took in the first round. But otherwise, it's been all day three fodder, late round picks kind of guys. And some of those guys like Carl Brooks, I don't know that Carl Brooks has gotten better since he was a 6th round pick and came in as a rookie. Warren Brinson had some nice moments. Nazir Stackhouse is a guy they rostered all season, so clearly they like him. But, trading Kenny Clark is something you do for Micah Parsons a million times out of a million, right? But they did lose something when Clark went to Dallas, and I think they need an impact player. I think they need some juice up front. If you guys want to watch the 4 teams who played before the snow really started coming down and the D-line couldn't really get as much traction in the AFC game. But watch those 4 defensive lines play and how much that pocket pushes backwards from the middle. And with Green Bay, it just didn't do that as much, especially once Wyatt left the game. And that is something that 2022 Eagles team we talked about did really well with. Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave. Those were guys, I think both of them had double-digit sacks that season. But when they weren't sacking the quarterback, they were pushing the pocket and able to do things like that as well. So you want to talk about the path to the Super Bowl, the quarterbacks, the receivers, all the skill players, all that stuff. That's got the sex appeal, but games are won and lost in this game, and they always will be on that line of scrimmage. If you can't block them, Patrick Mahomes, you mentioned earlier, Brandon, might be the greatest quarterback ever, right? The 2 Super Bowls he lost. Philadelphia beat the hell out of him. Tampa Bay beat the hell out of him. Tom Brady, the Super Bowls he lost, one against Philly's kind of the outlier, but the Giants beat him up twice. Like, that is the equalizer, in my opinion, for those things. So if you can't block them, I don't care who you have playing receiver and who you have playing quarterback. It's just not going to matter. Green Bay's case, I think they're all right at the skill spots other than corner and not good enough up front on either side of the ball. So I think that should be their priority, no questions asked.
Coach, that's probably music to your ears, Coach. You love the trenches. Those are the big uglies.
I do. But, here's the thing. It was so unstable. And I don't know how many different combinations that they had, and they got guys hurt. And I get
played like 8 different combos in the first 4 weeks
hard,
or something
guys,
stupid like that.
That's really hard to be consistently good when you have guys flipping and flopping. And And I mentioned this before, left tackle is not right tackle. It's a different position. And it's like, oh, we'll just move a guy over there. It's not the way it works, because the technique is totally different on how you slide and how you kick and how you jam and all that. Guys up front. So when you're going from right side to left side, that's tough. That's tough to do, you know. And then when you lose your center, that's not a good thing either. I mean, because who has the ball in their hands every time is the center, right? That's where it all starts and stops, you know, with the guys up front. And he makes all the line calls and all that. So I think Tom not playing this year, I think that hurt him. I mean, he's a good player, and he's
probably their best overall offensive lineman.
He could never stay healthy. He just, for whatever reason, he couldn't stay healthy. I agree with you as far as the guys on the defensive line, but I think the corner spot is something that they really need to address, because the safeties were good, right? But you got to be really good on the edge too out there. And I mean, who are our shutdown guys? We're shutting you down with that guy. Who is that?
There aren't that many guys that exist in the NFL now.
But if you were talking about what is it going to take to be a contender, who is the best corner that we have, do you guys think?
Oh, I mean, it's not saying much, but Keyshawn Nixon.
Okay.
But Keyshawn Nixon's not starting for Seattle or New England, just for comparison's sake. I think that's what you're driving.
He is starting in the Pro Bowl, though, Jacob. We do know that.
Yes, he should. Anything that'll piss off Ross Uglum, I'm all for.
Shador's playing too.
Coach, real quick. We got like a minute or two, but I'm always curious from the coaching perspective. What does the offseason look like? The Packers lose to Chicago.
Yep.
What are you guys doing? Like,
you know what a great question, because things never change, right? And you're just creatures of habit. So here's what happened. As soon as the season ended, got all the players physicals and had them getting out of Green Bay. And then the first thing they do is you have a week off, and then you have your scheme evaluation, and you break down your offense from every possible angle that you can have. And I mean, guys, it goes so in depth. You talk about like the political autopsy, like why did the Democrats lose the whole deal? It's a big damn deal. So that happens. And then what you have is your free agency, right? The Packers have never been that big in free agency because they always want to build through the draft. But then once you have your free agents, then you go into the draft part of it, right? And the draft meetings and the draft evaluations, and like say that you're going to take a receiver, they would take every snap. Like last year with Golden, they took every snap that he caught a ball, everyone, and the ones he dropped too, any target, and they watched all of it, right? It's very, very in depth. So as soon as the draft is over, so you got your free agency, what do we need now? Then you go with the draft, and then you've got like mini camps and all that, and then that ends, and then you go to OTAs, and all OTAs are you're installing what you're going to do in the summer camp. That's what you do. So you do it twice. So that's it, and then all of a sudden you're in the preseason. But it just goes from one thing to another, and it never changes. So that was always good because you always knew what was happening, what was coming up.
The offseason underway for the Green Bay Packers. There is, however, one more game left, two more teams left. How do the Packers stack up against those remaining two, and what lessons can be learned from this season? We'll take a look at that coming up after our final break here on Locked On Packers. Tonight's Locked On Packers is brought to you by our wonderful friends over at PrizePicks. The big game is almost here, and there's no better way to stay locked in on every moment with PrizePicks, the daily fantasy app where it almost feels too good to be right. With football season coming down to its final stretch, now is the perfect time to close it out strong. PrizePick makes watching the game even more exciting by letting you build simple lineups around player projections. No drafts, no waiting, just a football action all the way through the playoffs. It is incredibly easy to get started. Pick two or more players and choose more or less on their player projections. Makes watching those games way more engaging, especially during the playoffs and the big game. Download the PrizePick app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code Locked On NFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. It's good to be right. Super Bowl 60 is set. The Seattle Seahawks will take on the New England Patriots in this one. The Packers not playing either one of these teams this season. They did, however, beat Seattle last year. But Coach, how do you think the Packers right now, and obviously things are going to change a little bit for both of these teams, but how do you think this Packers team stacks up against the two remaining teams left in the season?
At the peak of the season, I think they do. I think they do very well. At the end of the season, it wouldn't. I don't think so at all. Especially at Seattle. I think Seattle would kick the hell out of Packers. That's just my opinion. Watching what they did last week, I think they're very, very dominant up front, and Darnold, the way he played that game, man. You know, I tell you, if you're at Minnesota right now, are you just shrugging and going like, why do we let that guy go?
Minnesota, right? The Jets,
right?
Maybe not Carolina. Yeah, like there's probably a few teams out there.
I know, but you know what though? Good for that guy, right? You kind of cheer for him to be successful. I think at the peak when they were playing really, really good, I think it'd be a really good matchup. But like towards the end here, no, I don't think it'd be close. Not in Seattle.
If the Packers don't have Tucker Kraft and Micah Parsons, I would agree with you. But I think, Jacob, if you give me those two guys, specifically those two guys, I do believe, and maybe this is a little bit of the fan and the bias and the homer in me, I think the Packers could have beaten any four of the teams remaining. I go back to that Denver game, Jacob, it's not Mile High Stadium. It's like, what is it? Empower or whatever.
It's Mile High Stadium.
Mile High. You know where I'm getting at. I mean, the Packers are up 9 points, Coach, in that second half, and they're driving
3 inches away from boat racing them. Like if
and
Watson
their
scores
season,
a touchdown.
right? And their season derails, and that was with a healthy Bo Nix, for what it's worth. I do believe, and I know it's a big, what if, but if you have your two best players, one from each side of the ball, obviously Micah Parsons, you can make the argument. Obviously, Jordan Love is probably the Packers' best offensive weapon, but I think Tucker Kraft is certainly right behind him. You give me those two guys, I do believe that the Green Bay Packers, they beat Seattle last year. I know they didn't have Sam Darnold there last year, but I do think that this Green Bay Packers team, with those two guys in the lineup, we didn't even talking about Zach Tom, who was also missing time, and Edgerrin Cooper, who went down in the second half against the Chicago Bears. Like, I think this Packers team stacks up very, very well against any of the four remaining teams. Had you given me those two guys, Jacob, I think I give the Packers a 50-50 chance to be playing in Super Bowl 60.
Yeah, I mean, I remember after they beat Chicago and that was after Kraft had gotten injured, I was telling my family because they were making like plans to do stuff. I was like, guys, the NFC Championship game is, January 25th. And if Green Bay's at home, like I will be there, kind of thing for work and everything. I was planning on covering the playoffs throughout the month of January after that happened. Obviously, after the fact, that's not the way that worked out. I think with those guys on the field, the Packers, they're as talented as any team. I think you saw Matthew Stafford was lights out on Sunday night outside of, maybe a play here or there. But, like, he was incredible. Jordan Love is just as good as him, I think. Maybe not the same level of arm talent. Stafford has one of the best arms, I think, in arguably in NFL history. But he's been – I think Love was a fringe MVP candidate. He could certainly do that. They have the receiving talent to give Seattle some fits on that defense and everything like that. I think where they would have come up short is that by the end of the year, Seattle's running game was humming and Green Bay's run defense was not working that direction. Kenneth Walker, kind of the style of runner that can give them some trouble on that side of things. But I think Coach is right that if they had played – so if Green Bay beat Chicago, they would have gone to Seattle. I don't think the final would have been – I think what was it against San Francisco, 41-6 or something like that. Like it wouldn't have been that bad, but it's a double-digit loss, and we're just kind of like, by the end of the year, they're just out of guys and out of horses to compete with that team. But at full strength, they can. The problem that we're talking about here is that when is an NFL team ever at full strength? So I think that the one thing you could point to with these two teams is neither one of them have lost like one of their, the New England's not playing in this game without Drake May. They're not going to be without Christian Gonzalez or anybody like that. Same in Seattle's side is their key players. Charbonnet, I think, is the best player that they've lost. And he's kind of their backup / 1A committee running back. So,
and they might be better with Kenneth Walker, quite frankly.
That very well could be. So that's certainly a discussion. But I think what it boils down to is this team is talented enough to beat anybody. As much negativity as there has been surrounding this team, and I think it's been deserved. Like the Packers haven't exactly done anything to not earn the negativity that is surrounding. When you lose 5 games in a row to finish the season, that's the way this whole business works, right? Sure. But it has kind of taken away some of the fact that when you have arguably the best quarterback in the conference, which Jordan Love may very well be entering the 2026 season, and Micah Parsons on the defensive side of the ball, those two players alone put you ahead of the curve. And that doesn't include Christian Watson, Tucker Kraft, some of the other guys that we're kind of talking about on this team that we like and are really talented.
Josh Jacobs.
Sure. They're all, I mean, they have a chance to get there. Like, you don't have to squint very hard to see the Packers playing in Super Bowl 61 a year from now. It's not like Tennessee where you'd have to be like, man, everything would have to go right, kind of thing. It doesn't have to work that way in Green Bay, but they do have some, pretty major things I think that they need to figure out how to clean up, but they are in a window to win a championship. And it wasn't just this season, despite what some people may want to pitch it as.
Yeah. I tell you this too, though, guys, the running game, they weren't running the ball good. They just weren't. And
coach, Josh Jacobs looked the best he's looked in Chicago, in that wild
for a half. Well, yeah, I mean, in the second half, they could have put Walter Payton back there.
I was going to say they weren't really getting anything going in the.
But I'm just saying, like the running game too. To be a Super Bowl team, I think you got to be able to run the ball, at least control it a little bit. But anyway, I mean, I love the Packers. I mean, I always want them to win, and next year be here before you know it.
One final question before we get away this evening on Locked On Packers, and this can be for both of you. I'll give you about a minute each to answer. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Biggest lessons from this past season. We talked about things that may need to change. How about things that must carry over from 2025 into 2026? Jacob, I'll start with you.
Quarterback play, and I think that one of the downsides to Matt, he didn't do in the playoffs. I want to keep pushing back when people say he took his foot off the gas, but one of the weaknesses that LaFleur, I think, has as an offensive play caller, as a coach in general, is keeping the Ferrari in the garage. I'm not saying you got Aaron Rodgers in his prime. Nobody is Aaron Rodgers in his prime. That's one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. But Jordan Love's an MVP candidate. The offense starts and stops with number 10 if he's healthy and he's under center. And I think that's something that you have to lean into next season. And the idea that you don't have to shorten the game, that there was kind of that. Once he got the lead, Justice Mosqueda always jokes he would pop the football if he was allowed to after they took a 10-point lead or something like that. I think the edge, if you will, to try and embarrass the opposing team. I'm not saying you have to run up the score or anything like that, but just because you're up 23-14 doesn't mean you have to try and take the air out of the football now. It's time to keep scoring and make it 30, 37, 44, so on and so forth to keep putting points on the board. And I think the quarterback is a big reason for that. So let him go.
All gas, no break, as Matt LaFleur
some might say that, yeah.
Famously said. Coach, we talked a lot about what must change. What about something that might stay?
I'll tell you one thing that it was emphasized on defense, but it didn't happen are the turnovers. We didn't get as many turnovers this year. I mean, that was always the emphasis with Hafley and all that. And we just didn't get the ball a lot. Do you know what we were turnover ratio, Brandon? Do you have that in front of you?
I know they only had like 13 takeaways on the season.
Yeah, I mean, that's not enough.
I think they were +5 going into the Chicago game. So
yeah, that's just not enough, right? I mean, if you look at like the winning teams, they're way up there in the turnover margin. But I would like to see that better, and it's just you got to be opportunistic. And what happens too is when you create chaos up front, that's when things happen.
One final game left in the NFL season, Super Bowl 60. We'll break that down, and we have all offseason to look ahead and what this Green Bay Packers will or will not do. My thanks to each and every one of you for tuning in. A friendly reminder, the Locked On Packers Squad Show and the Daily Show with our guy, Peter Bukowski, free and available wherever you guys get audio podcasts. We're over on YouTube as well. Don't forget to hit to that subscribe button for Jacob, for Coach, and for myself. We will sign off for now. We'll check back in later this week. We'll examine Super Bowl 60. We'll continue to nitpick the Packers offseason and see what they can do to improve in 2026. Thanks to each and every one of you for tuning in. Thank you for making Locked On Packers part of your day each and every single day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. And as always, stay locked on Packers.